Picture this. You've been working for 6 hours straight. You are starving. You step outside, and right there is a street vendor. You buy a fresh, steaming hot samosa. When you break it in half, the heat, the smell, that first bite, it is absolute perfection. Managerial economics turns the cold logic of price and output into a toolkit for business owners, focusing specifically on the psychological drivers that help a manager make a rational decision. At the core of this psychology is a concept called utility. In economics, utility isn't about a product being strictly useful, like a hammer. It is purely the psychological feeling of pleasure or satisfaction you get from consuming something. Going back to that street food cart, your first samosa delivers massive utility. Your brain rewards you heavily because you were so hungry. But then you eat a second one. Still good, but not as amazing. By the time you force down a fourth or fifth samosa, you aren't getting any pleasure at all. You're probably feeling sick. Every additional unit you consume gives you less extra satisfaction, a principle known as the law of diminishing marginal utility. This graph charts that transition. The top curve tracks total overall satisfaction, while the bottom line tracks marginal utility. Notice how the marginal line plunges downwards. When it hits 0 at Unit 4, total satisfaction reaches its ceiling, turning any extra pleasure negative. Because human satisfaction naturally decays with repetition, a business cannot rely on selling the exact same experience indefinitely. They have to constantly adapt to shifting desires just to maintain their baseline relevance. In a real market, consumers navigate a landscape of competing desires, constantly ranking their preference for one item against the appeal of another, like choosing between chai and coffee. Since we can't measure happiness in exact numerical units, economists use what's called ordinal utility. We instinctively rank different combinations of goods based on our preference, finding different mixes that leave us equally satisfied. This curve maps out those exact trade-offs. Any point along this line represents a combination of commodity X and commodity Y that gives the consumer the exact same total amount of happiness. It shapes downward like a slide rather than a straight line due to the diminishing marginal rate of substitution. As you slide down the curve, you have fewer units of Y left, making them more valuable to you. You require more and more units of X to willingly give up your remaining stock. So consumer desire is mathematically predictable. But desire alone doesn't clear inventory. You need actual purchasing power. That brings us to the budget line. This is the harsh, unyielding physical boundary of what a consumer can afford to spend. To figure out exactly what people will buy, we overlay their desires onto their wallet. Consumer equilibrium is the exact point where a person's highest possible indifference curve perfectly aligns, touching just the edge of their budget line. When we plot these individual points of equilibrium across thousands of different buyers, each with their own budget and preferences, a larger pattern emerges. We sum these individual choices together to find the total market demand, the collective pulse of the entire customer base. Under normal conditions, this aggregate behavior follows a strict rule known as the law of demand. As the price of an item goes up, the total quantity demanded goes down. But humans are irrational, and our egos frequently break the math. Consider high-status luxury items, like a solid gold Rolex. These are known as Veblen goods. People don't buy them for their utility in telling time, they buy them to signal wealth. The high price tag is the actual product. If a luxury brand gets nervous and drops prices to attract more buyers, they strip away the prestige. The item loses its status signaling power, and demand actually falls. Psychology completely overrides the financial logic. For a business leader, knowing that price affects demand is obvious. The actual challenge is predicting exactly how many customers will walk out the door if you raise prices by 5 or 10%. To figure this out before making a fatal pricing error, businesses rely on a diagnostic metric called the price elasticity of demand, which measures consumer responsiveness. Take a bare necessity, like table salt. If the price of salt suddenly doubles tomorrow, you aren't going to stop salting your food. Your consumption remains exactly the same. Look at this chart. The demand curve is a perfectly vertical line. The price shifts up and down the y-axis, but the quantity demanded on the x-axis does not budge. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have highly elastic demand. Think about an easily substitutable tech gadget. If that company pushes the price up even slightly, consumers will immediately abandon the brand for a cheaper rival. Here, the curve flattens out significantly. A tiny vertical bump in price triggers a massive horizontal drop in the quantity sold. These metrics don't exist in a vacuum. Cross-elasticity tracks how interconnected markets behave, showing how a steep price increase for coffee directly pushes up the demand for its closest substitute, tea. Managerial economics acts as a diagnostic framework. By identifying whether a product behaves like a necessity or a luxury, a business finds the exact ceiling of what the market will bear. But individual consumer choices are only half the story. Next time, we zoom out to look at the massive, uncontrollable forces that move entire nations. Macroeconomics.
Take a look at this comparison. On the left is what 1,000 rupees bought at the grocery store a decade ago. On the right is what that exact same 1,000 rupees buys you today. Your paycheck might show a larger number now, but that is simply the nominal value. The real value, the actual physical amount of goods you can carry out of the store, has dropped. A higher salary doesn't guarantee you are actually richer. When we scale this problem up from your personal wallet to an entire country, we leave the study of individual households, or microeconomics, and enter macroeconomics, the study of the entire economic forest. As this textbook excerpt notes, the term macroeconomics was first introduced by Ragnar Frisch in 1933 to analyze the behavior of an economy as a whole. This brings us to a major problem. If a government claims its economy is booming, how do we know if it is creating actual wealth, or if it is just printing bigger numbers on the price tags? To find out, economists start with the biggest number a country has, gross domestic product, or GDP. This is the total market value of all the goods and services produced within a country's borders in a single year. But raw GDP is inflated by wearing assets. Looking at this formula, we subtract depreciation to get net domestic product. Panning to the second equation, we adjust for borders. By subtracting leaving foreign profits and adding profits sent home, we convert to gross national product. Finally, we arrive here, net national product. By accounting for both asset depreciation and foreign income flows, NNP serves as the formal baseline definition of a country's national income. One reliable way to calculate this wealth is the expenditure method. We simply add up the spending, private consumption, business investment, government purchases, and net exports. These formulas give us a neat ledger of a nation's wealth, but they have a massive blind spot. They are highly vulnerable to the silent wealth destroyer, inflation. The economist Colborn defined inflation perfectly. It is a condition where too much money is chasing too few goods. The result is a persistent drop in purchasing power. At low speeds, this isn't an issue. Creeping and walking inflation are mild, gradual price increases that act as normal characteristics of a healthy economy. But when the rate accelerates into galloping inflation or hyperinflation, the system breaks down. It wipes out savings accounts and forces citizens to physically hoard essential goods before prices double again. Take a look at this banknote. When Zimbabwe's currency system collapsed in 2008, the central bank was forced to print a $100 trillion bill just to keep up with daily transactions. And this photograph from Germany in 1922 shows the reality on the ground. The currency lost its real value so rapidly that stacks of cash were cheaper to use as children's building blocks than actual toys. Even worse is the scenario outlined here, stagflation. This occurs when economic growth completely stalls and unemployment rises, yet the prices of everyday goods continue to climb. Because inflation can skew the numbers so drastically, policymakers cannot rely on raw GDP. They need diagnostic tools to scrub the data and separate actual economic growth from basic price hikes. To find out what a country is actually producing, economists use specific mathematical indices to extract the hot air of inflation from the national data. This is the GDP deflator formula. By dividing the nominal GDP by the real GDP, this equation acts as a price index, isolating the exact percentage that prices have increased over time. Another method is tracking market indices. While the wholesale price index tracks what businesses pay for bulk goods, the consumer price index, or CPI, tracks a specific basket of goods that regular people actually buy to survive.
In 2014, former RBI Governor Raghuram Rajan spearheaded a major shift in India, moving the country away from wholesale metrics and adopting the CPI as the primary inflation measure to better reflect daily reality of the common citizen. These diagnostic tools, the GDP deflator and the CPI, are essential. They allow a finance minister to see past the big numbers and determine if the country is generating tangible value or just printing expensive paper. So the next time you see a news headline bragging about a nation hitting an all-time high GDP, take a closer look. Ask if they are reporting the nominal growth or the real growth. Look up the current consumer price index. Check if those extra zeros are actually buying more goods. True economic literacy is about looking past the top-line number. It is knowing exactly what your money is worth in the real world.